Thetis, having brought Achilles his new armour, and promised to preserve the body of Patroclus from corruption, he is reconciled to Agamemnon, and being miraculously invigorated by Minerva, goes forth to battle, regardless of the prediction of his fate by his horse Xanthus. Saffron-robed Morn was rising from the streams of ocean, that she might bear light to immortals and mortals. But Thetis came to the ships, bearing the gifts from the god. Her dear son she found lying upon Patroclus, bitterly lamenting, and his numerous companions were lamenting around him. But near to him stood the divine of goddesses, and hung upon his hand, and spoke, and addressed him: "My son, let us suffer him now to lie, grieved although we be, since first he has been laid low by the counsel of the gods. But do thou receive these distinguished arms from Vulcan, very beautiful, such as no man has ever worn upon his shoulders." Having thus spoken, the goddess placed the armour before Achilles, and they, all curiously wrought, clashed aloud. Then tremor seized all the Myrmidons, nor did anyone dare to look directly at them, but they fled in fear. But when Achilles saw them, the more rage entered him, and his eyes shone terribly beneath his eyelids, like a flame, and he was delighted, holding in his hands the splendid gifts of the god. But after he had delighted his mind, beholding these artificial works, he immediately addressed to his mother winged words: "Mother mine, the god hath indeed given arms, such as are fit to be works of immortals, nor that a mortal man could make. Truly now will I arm myself. But I very much fear, lest in the meantime the flies, having entered the gallant son of Menoetius by his spear-inflicted wounds, create maggots, and pollute the corse, for life in it is destroyed, and all the parts of the body grow putrid." But him the silver-footed goddess Thetis then answered: "My child, let not these things be a care to thy mind. I will endeavour to drive away from him the fierce swarms, the flies which devour heroes slain in battle. For although he lie an entire year, his body shall always be uncorrupted, or even better. But do thou, having summoned the Grecian heroes to an assembly, having renounced thy wrath towards Agamemnon, the shepherd of the people, arm thyself quickly for war, and put on thy might." Thus therefore, having spoken, she infused into him the most daring courage, and then instilled into Patroclus through the nostrils ambrosia and ruby nectar, that his body might be uncorrupted. But noble Achilles went along the shore of the sea, shouting fearfully, and aroused the Grecian heroes, so that even those who used formerly to remain in the assemblage of the ships, both those who were pilots, and who held the rudders of the ships, and the pursuers who were at the ships, dispensers of food, even these men indeed went to the assembly, because Achilles appeared, for he had long abstained from the grievous battle. And 2 servants of Mars, the warlike son of Tydeus, and noble Ulysses, went limping, leaning upon a spear, for they still had painful wounds, and advancing they sat in the front seats. But last came the king of men, Agamemnon, having a wound. For him also, in the sharp battle, Coon, the son of Antenor, had wounded with his brazen spear. Then when all the Greeks were assembled, swift-footed Achilles, rising up amongst them, said: "Son of Atreus, this would surely have been somewhat better for both thee and me, when we too, grieved at heart, raged with soul-devouring contention for the sake of a girl. Would that Diana had slain her with an arrow in the ships on that day, when wasting I took Lyrnessus. Then indeed so many Greeks had not seized the mighty ground in their teeth under the hands of the enemy, I being continually enraged. This, however, was better for Hector and the Trojans, but I think the Greeks will long remember the contention of you and me. But let us leave these things as past, although grieved, subduing from necessity the soul within our bosoms. And now I terminate my wrath, nor is it at all fit that I always obstinately be enraged. But come quickly, incite the long-haired Achaeans to battle, in order that still I may make trial of the Trojans, going against them, if they wish to pass the night at the ships. But of them I think that any will very gladly bend the knee, whoever shall escape out of the destructive fight from my spear." Thus he spoke. But the well-grieved Greeks rejoiced, the magnanimous son of Peleus renouncing his wrath. But then the king of men, Agamemnon, also addressed out of the same place, from his seat, nor advancing into the midst: "O friends, heroes of the Greeks, servants of Mars, it is becoming indeed that ye should hearken to me, thus rising, nor is it convenient that thou shouldst interrupt, for it is difficult even for one being skilled. But in a great uproar of men, how can any one hear or speak? But he is interrupted, although being a clear-toned orator. I indeed will direct myself to the son of Peleus. But do ye, the other Greeks, understand and carefully learn my meaning. Often already have the Greeks spoken this saying to me, and have rebuked me. But I am not to blame, but Jove and Fate and Erinus, roaming amid the shades, who during the assembly cast into my mind a sad injury, on that day when I myself took away the reward of Achilles. But what could I do? For the deity accomplishes all things. Pernicious Ate, the venerable daughter of Jove, who injures all. Her feet are tender, for she does not approach the ground, but she walks over the heads of men, injuring mankind, and one at least she fetters. For at one time she injured even Jove, who they say is the most powerful of men and gods. But him Juno, being a female, deceived by her guile on that day when Elabene was about to bring forth mighty Hercules and well-walled Thebes. He indeed boasting had said among all the gods, "Hear me, all ye gods and all ye goddesses, whilst I speak those things which the mind within my bosom urges. This day Ilithyia, presiding over births, shall bring into the light a certain man, who shall be ruler over all his neighbours, one of those men of the blood of my race." But him the august Juno addressed, devising guile, "Thou shalt lie, nor shalt thou insure accomplishment to thy speech. But come, swear a firm oath to me, O Olympian, that he shall indeed be ruler over all his neighbours, who shall this day fall between the feet of a woman, among those men who are of the blood of thy family." Thus she spoke, but Jove perceived not her crafty design, but he swore the mighty oath, and afterwards was much befooled. Then Juno, springing forth, quitted the top of Olympus, and came speedily to Achaean Argus, where she knew the noble spouse of Sthenelus, the son of Perseus. And she indeed was pregnant of her beloved son, and the 7th month was at hand. And she brought him into light, being deficient the number of months, but kept back the delivery of Alemone, and restrained the Ilithyia. And herself bearing the message, addressed Jove, the son of Saturn. "Father Jove, hurler of the red lightning, I will put a certain matter in thy mind. A noble man is now born, who shall rule the Argives, Eurystheus, the son of Perseus, thy offspring, nor is it unbecoming that he should govern the Argives." Thus she spoke, but sharp grief smote him in his deep mind, and immediately he seized Ate by her head of shining curls, enraged in his mind, and swore a powerful oath, that Ate, who injures all, should never again return to Olympus and the starry heaven. Thus saying, he cast her from the starry heaven, whirling her round in his hand. But she quickly reached the works of men. On her account he always groaned, when he beheld his beloved son suffering unworthy toil under the labours of Eurystheus. So I also, when the great crest-tossing Hector was thus destroying the Greeks at the sterns of the ships, was not able to forget the wrong which I had formerly foolishly committed. But since I have suffered harm, and Jove has taken away my reason, I am willing again to appease thee, and to give infinite presents. But arise to the battle, and incite the other people, and I myself will pledge myself to furnish all the presents, as many as noble Ulysses yesterday going to thee promised in thy tents. Yet if thou wilt, wait a little, although hastening to battle, and my servants taking the presents from my ship, shall bring them, that thou mayest see that I will present thee with appeasing offerings. But him swift-footed Achilles answering addressed, "Most glorious son of Atreus, king of men, Agamemnon, whether thou wilt furnish gifts, as is meet, or keep them with me, will be seen. But now let us very quickly be mindful of the contest, for it is not fitting to waste time in idle talk, nor to delay, as a mighty work is yet undone. But as some one may again behold Achilles among the front ranks, destroying the phalanxes of the Trojans with his brazen spear, so also let some one of you, keeping this in mind, fight with his man." But him Ulysses, on many wiles answering, addressed, "Not thus, brave as thou art, O godlike Achilles, urge on the sons of the Greeks, fasting towards Ilium, about to fight with the Trojans. For the conflict will not be for a short time only, when once the phalanxes of men shall mingle, and the god breathe might into both. But command the Greeks to be fed at the ships with food and wine, for this is might and vigour. For a man unrefreshed by food would not be able to fight against the enemy all day to the setting sun. For although he might desire in his mind to fight, yet his limbs gradually grow languid, and thirst and hunger come upon him, and his knees fail him as he goes. The man, on the other hand, who is satiated with wine and food, fights all day with hostile men. The heart within his breast is daring, nor are his limbs at all fatigued before that all retire from battle. And let the king of men Agamemnon bring the gifts into the midst of the assembly, that all the Greeks may see them with their eyes, and thou mayest be delighted in thy mind. Let him moreover swear an oath to thee, standing up among the Greeks, that he has never ascended her bed, nor has been mingled with her, as is the custom, O king of men and wives, and to thee thyself. Also let the soul within thy breast be placid. Then let him next conciliate thee by a rich banquet within his tents, that thou mayest not have aught wanting of redress. And for the future, O son of Atreus, thou wilt be more just towards another, for it is by no means unworthy that a king should appease a man when he may first have given offence. But him the king of men, Agamemnon, in return addressed: I rejoice, O son of Laertes, having heard thy speech, for with propriety hast thou gone through and enumerated all things. These things I am willing to swear, as my mind orders me, in presence of a god, nor will I perjure myself. But let Achilles remain here at least for a little while, though hastening to battle, and do all ye others remain assembled, until they bring the gifts from my tents, and we strike faithful leagues. To thyself, however, O Ulysses, I give this charge, and order thee, selecting the principal youths of all the Greeks, to bear from my ship the gifts, as many as we yesterday promised that we should give to Achilles, and to lead hither the women. But let Talthybius also quickly prepare for me through the wide army of the Greeks a boar to sacrifice to Jove and the sun. Him answering, swift-footed Achilles then addressed: Most glorious son of Atreus, king of men, Agamemnon, at some other time ought they rather to attend to these things, when any cessation of battle hereafter be, and so much ardour be not in my bosom. But at present those lie mangled, whom Hector son of Priam subdued, when Jove gave him the glory, but ye urge them to food. Now indeed I should excite the sons of the Greeks to fight, fasting, but with the setting sun, to prepare a large supper, after we have revenged our disgrace. Before that neither drink nor food shall pass down my throat, my companion being slain, who lies in my tent, torn with a sharp brass, turned towards the vestibule, whilst his comrades mourn around these things are not a care to my mind, but slaughter, and bloodshed, and the dreadful groans of heroes. But him much scheming Ulysses answering addressed: O Achilles, son of Peleus, by far the bravest of the Greeks, thou art superior indeed to me, and not a little more valiant with the spear, but I indeed excel thee much in prudence, because I was born before thee, and no more. Wherefore let thy mind be restrained by my words. Soon is there a satiety of contest to the men, a most abundant crop of whom the brass pours upon the earth, but the harvest is very small. When Jove, who is the umpire of the battle of men, inclines his scales, it is by no means fit that the Greeks should lament the dead with the stomach, for in great numbers, and one upon the other, are they every day falling. When, therefore, could any one respire from toil? But it is necessary to bury him whosoever may die, having a patient mind, weeping for a day. But as many as survive the hateful combat should be mindful of drinking and of food, in order that we may ever the more ceaselessly contend with our enemies, clad as to our bodies in impenetrable brass. Nor let any of the troops lie by awaiting another exhortation, for evilly will that exhortation come upon him, whoever may be left at the ships of the Greeks. But advancing in a body, let us stir up the keen battle against the horse-breaking Trojans. He said, and chose as his companions the son of glorious Nestor, Damiges, son of Phyleus, Thoas, and Meriones, Icomedes, son of Creon, and Menelaus, and they proceeded to go towards the tent of Agamemnon, son of Atreus. Immediately after the word was spoken, and the work was perfected, 7 tripods they bore from the tent, which he had promised him, and 20 splendid goblets, and 12 steeds, and straightway led forth 7 blameless women skilled in works, but the 8th was fair-cheeked Briseis. But Ulysses, placing 10 whole talents of gold, led the way. And with him the other youths of the Greeks bore the presents, and placed them in the midst of the assembly. But Agamemnon rose up, and Talthybius, like unto a god in his voice, stood beside the shepherd of the people, holding a boar in his hands. Then the son of Atreus, drawing the knife with his hands, which always hung by the great scabbard of his sword, cutting off the forelock of the boar, prayed, lifting up his hands to Jove. But all the Greeks sat in silence in the same spot, listening in a becoming manner to the king. But praying, he spoke, looking towards the wide heaven: Now first let Jove be witness, and the most supreme and best of gods, and earth, and sun, and ye Furies, who beneath the earth chastise men, whoever may swear a falsehood, Never have I laid hands upon the maid Briseis, needing her for the sake of the couch, or any other purpose, but inviolate has she remained in my tents. But if any of these things be false, may the gods inflict on me those very many distresses which they inflict when men sin in swearing." He said, and cut the throat of the boar with the ruthless brass, which Talthybius, whirling round, cast into the mighty water of the hoary sea, as food for fishes. But Achilles, rising, said among the war-loving Greeks, "O father Jove, certainly thou givest great calamities to men, for never could Atrides have so thoroughly aroused the indignation in my bosom, nor foolish led away the girl, I being unwilling. But Jove for some intent wished death should happen to many Greeks. But now go to the repast, that we may join battle." Thus then he spoke, and dissolved the assembly in haste. They indeed were separated, each to his own ship, but the magnanimous Myrmidons were occupied about the gifts, and bearing them went to the ship of godlike Achilles. These they laid up in the tents, and placed the women in seats, but the illustrious attendants drove the horses to the stud. But afterwards Briseis, like unto golden Venus, when she beheld Patroclus lacerated with a sharp spear, throwing herself about him, wept aloud, and with her hands tore her breast and tender neck, and fair countenance. Then the woman, like unto the goddesses, weeping, said, "O Patroclus, most dear to my wretched soul, I left thee indeed alive, departing from my tent, but now returning I find thee dead. O chieftain of the people, how in my case evil ever succeeds evil? The hero indeed to whom my father and venerable mother had given me, I saw pierced with a sharp brass before the city, and 3 beloved brothers whom the same mother had brought forth to me, all drew on the destructive day. Nevertheless thou didst not suffer me to weep, when swift Achilles slew my husband, and laid waste the city of divine Mynes. But thou saidst thou wouldst render me the wedded wife of noble Achilles, lead me in the ships to Phthia, and prepare the nuptial feast amongst the Myrmidons. Therefore do I insatiably lament thee, dead being ever gentle." Thus she spoke, weeping, and the women lamented for Patroclus as a pretext, but really each for her own ills. And around him Achilles were collected the elders of the Greeks, entreating him to take refreshment, but he, moaning, refused. "I entreat you, if any of my beloved companions would be obedient to me, bid me not satiate my heart with food or drink, since heavy grief hath invaded me, but I will wait entirely till the setting sun, and will endure." So saying, he dismissed the other kings, but 2 sons of Atreus remained, and noble Ulysses, Nestor, Idomeneus, and the aged knight Phoenix, constantly endeavouring to delight him sorrowing, nor was he at all delighted, before he should enter the mount of bloody war. But remembering Patroclus, he frequently heaved a sigh, and said, "Surely once thou too, O unhappy one, dearest of my companions, wouldst thyself have set before me a plentiful feast, within my tent, speedily and diligently, when the Greeks hastened to make tearful war upon the horse-breaking Trojans. But now thou liest mangled. But my heart is without drink and food, though they are within, from regret for thee. For I could not suffer anything worse, nor even if I were to hear of my father being dead, who now perhaps sheds the tender tear in Phthia from the want of such a son, while I and a foreign people wage war against the Trojans for the sake of detested Helen, or him my beloved son who was nurtured for me at Scyros, if indeed he still lives, godlike Neoptolemus, for formerly the mind within my bosom hoped that I alone should perish here in Troy, far from steed-nourishing Argos, and that thou shouldst return to Phthia, that thou mightest lead back my son in thy black ship from Scyros, and mightest show him everything, my property, my servants, and my great lofty domed abode. For now I suppose that Peleus is either totally deceased, or that he barely alive suffers pain from hateful old age, and that he is continually expecting bad news respecting me, when he shall hear of my being dead." Thus he spoke, weeping, and the elders also groaned, remembering each of them the things which they had left in their dwellings. But the son of Saturn felt compassion, seeing them weeping, and immediately to Minerva addressed winged words. "O daughter mine, thou entirely now desertest thy valiant hero. Is Achilles then no longer at all a care to thee in thy mind? He himself is sitting before his lofty peaked ships, bewailing his dear companion, while the others have gone to a banquet, but he is unrefreshed and unfed. Go therefore, instill into his breast nectar and delightful ambrosia, that hunger may not come upon him." So saying, he urged on Minerva, who was before eager, but she, like unto a broad-winged, shrill-voiced harpy, leaped down from the heavens through the air. The Greeks, however, were then arming themselves throughout the camp, when she instilled into the bosom of Achilles nectar and delightful ambrosia, that unpleasant hunger might not come upon his limbs. Then she went to the solid mansion of her powerful sire, and they apart poured forth from the swift ships. And as when thick snowflakes fly down from Jove, beneath the force of the cold, air-clearing Boreas, so from the ships were borne out crowded helmets, shining brightly, and bossed shields, strong cavitied corslets, and ashen spears. But the sheen reached to heaven, and all the earth around smiled beneath the splendor of the brass, and a trampling of the feet of men arose beneath. In the midst noble Achilles was armed, and there was a gnashing of his teeth, and his eyes shone like a blaze of fire. But intolerable grief entered his heart within him, and enraged against the Trojans, he put on the gifts of the god, which Vulcan toiling had fabricated for him. First around his legs he placed the beautiful greaves, joined with silver clasps. Next he put on the corslet round his breast, and suspended from his shoulders the brazen, silver-studded sword. Then he seized the shield, large and solid, the sheen of which went to a great distance, as of the moon, and as when from the sea the blaze of a burning fire shines to mariners, which is lit aloft amongst the mountains in a solitary place, but the storm bears them against their inclination away from their friends over the fishy deep. So from the shield of Achilles, beautiful and skilfully made, the brightness reached the sky. But raising it, he placed the strong helmet upon his head, and the helmet crested with horsehair shone like a star. And the golden tufts which Vulcan had diffused thick around the cone were shaken. Then noble Achilles tried himself in his arms, if they would fit him, and if his fair limbs would move freely in them. But they were like wings to him, and lifted up the shepherd of the people. And from its sheath he drew forth his paternal spear, heavy, great, and stout, which no other of the Greeks was able to brandish, but Achilles alone knew how to hurl it, a Pelian ash, which Chiron had cut for his father from the top of Pelion, to be a destruction to heroes. But Automedon and Alcimus, harnessing the steeds, yoked them, and beautiful collars were upon them. They put the bridles into their jaws, and drew back the reins towards the well-glued car, when Automedon, seizing the shining lash, fitted to his hand, leaped into the car. Achilles, armed for battle, mounted behind him, glittering in his armour like the shining sun, and terribly he gave command to the horses of his sire. "Xanthus and Balius, illustrious offspring of Podargus, resolve now in a different manner to bring back your charioteer in safety to the body of the Greeks, after we are satiated with battle, nor leave him there dead, like Patroclus." But from beneath the yoke, Xanthus, his swift-footed steed, addressed him, and immediately hung down his head, and his whole mane, drooping from the ring which was near the yoke, reached the ground. But the white-armed goddess Juno gave him the power of speech. "Now at least we will bear thee safe, O impetuous Achilles, but the fatal day draws nigh to thee. Nor are we to blame, but a mighty deity and violent destiny. For not by our laziness or sloth have the Trojans stripped the armour from the shoulders of Patroclus, but the bravest of the gods, whom fair-haired Latona brought forth, slew him among the front ranks, and gave glory to Hector. And though we can run even with the blast of Zephyrus, which they say is the most fleet, yet to thyself it is fated that thou shouldst be violently subdued by a god and a man." Of him having thus spoken, the Furies restrained the voice, but him swift-footed Achilles, greatly indignant, addressed. "O Xanthus, why dost thou predict my death to me? For it is not at all necessary for thee. Well do I myself know that it is my fate to perish here, far away from my dear father and mother. Nevertheless, I will not cease before the Trojans are abundantly satiated with war." He spoke, and shouting amongst the front ranks, directed on his solid-hoofed steeds. Jove permits the gods to join in the battle, and they take their respective places on either side. Aeneas engages Achilles, but is rescued by Neptune. Hector, in revenge for the death of his brother Polydorus, also attacks Achilles, and is only saved from death by the intervention of Apollo. Achilles then slays many Trojans. Thus around thee, O son of Peleus, were the Achaeans armed, insatiable in fight, beside their crooked ships, and the Trojans on the other side on the acclivity of the plain. But Jove ordered Themis to summon the gods to an assembly from the top of many-valleyed Olympus, and she, going round, ordered them to proceed to the palace of Jove. Nor was any one of the rivers absent, save Oceanus, nor of the nymphs who inhabit the pleasant groves and springs of rivers, and the grassy meads. Then, coming to the habitation of cloud-compelling Jove, they sat down upon shining polished benches, which Vulcan with cunning skill had made for father Jove. Thus were they assembled within the palace of Jove, nor did Neptune disobey the goddess, but he came to them from the sea. Then he sat in the midst, and inquired the design of Jove. "Why again, O hurler of the glowing lightning, hast thou summoned the gods to an assembly? Dost thou deliberate anything respecting the Trojans and Greeks? For now their combat and the battle are on the point of being kindled." But him cloud-compelling Jove answering addressed, "Thou knowest, O Earth-shaker, my design with my breast, and for whose sake I have assembled you, for though about to perish, they are a care to me. I will, however, remain sitting on the top of Olympus, whence looking, I shall delight my soul, but depart the rest of you, that ye may go to the Trojans and the Greeks. Give aid to both, according as is the inclination of each. For if Achilles alone shall fight against the Trojans, they will not even for a little sustain the swift-footed son of Peleus. Formerly, even beholding him, they fled terrified. But now, when he is grievously enraged in his mind on account of his companion, I fear lest he overthrow the wall, even contrary to fate." Thus spoke Saturnian Jove, and he stirred up the unyielding contest, and the gods hastened to proceed to the battle, having discordant minds. Juno, indeed, and Pallas Minerva went to the assemblage of the ships, as well as earth-shaking Neptune, and useful Mercury, who excelled in a prudent mind, with whom went Vulcan, looking savage in his might, limping, and under him his weak limbs moved with all their forces. But to the Trojans went crest-tossing Mars, and with him unshorn Phoebus, and Diana delighting in archery, Latona, Xanthus, and laughter-loving Venus. As long as the gods were apart from mortal men, so long the Greeks were greatly elated, because Achilles appeared, for he had long abstained from the dire battle, and a violent tremor came upon the Trojans, upon each of them as to their limbs, fearing because they beheld the swift-footed son of Peleus glittering in arms, equal to man-slaughtering Mars. But after the Olympians had come to the crowd of men, then arose fierce contention, the exciter of the people, and Minerva shouted, sometimes standing beside the trench, outside the wall, at other times she loudly shouted along the echoing shores. But Mars yelled aloud on the other side, like unto a dark whirlwind, keenly animating the Trojans from the lofty city, at other times running along the Simois, over Callicolone. Thus the blessed gods, inciting both sides, engaged, and among them made severe contention to break out. But dreadfully from above thundered the father of gods and men, whilst beneath Neptune shook the boundless earth and the lofty summits of the mountains. The roots and all the summits of many rilled Ida were shaken, and the city of the Trojans and the ships of the Greeks. Pluto himself, king of the netherworld, trembled beneath, and leaped up from his throne, terrified, and shouted aloud, lest earth-shaking Neptune should rend asunder the earth over him, and disclose to mortals and immortals his mansions, terrible, squalid, which even the gods loathe. So great a tumult arose from the gods engaging in combat. Against King Neptune indeed stood Phoebus Apollo, having his winged shafts, and against Mars the azure-eyed goddess Minerva. Opposed to Juno stood the goddess of the golden bow, huntress Diana, rejoicing in archery, the sister of Apollo, and opposite Latona, the preserver, useful Mercury. Against Vulcan also was a great deep-eddying river, which the gods called Xanthus, and men the Scamander. Thus indeed gods went against gods, but Achilles chiefly longed to penetrate through the crowd against Hector, the son of Priam, for with his blood his mind particularly ordered him to satiate Mars, the invincible warrior. But Apollo, exciter of troops, immediately aroused Æneas against the son of Peleus, and infused into him strong courage. And he likened himself in voice to Lycaon, the son of Priam, and having likened himself to him, Apollo, the son of Jove, said, "O Æneas, counsellor of the Trojans, where are thy threats, which, whilst carousing, thou didst promise to the leaders of the Trojans, that thou wouldst fight against Achilles, the son of Peleus?" But him Æneas answering, addressed in turn, "Son of Priam, why dost thou order me, not wishing it these things, to fight against magnanimous Pelides? For shall I not now for the first time stand against swift-footed Achilles? But already on another occasion he chased me with his spear from Ida, when he attacked our cattle, and laid waste Lyrnessus and Pedasus. But Jove preserved me, who excited my strength and nimble limbs. Certainly I should have been subdued beneath the hands of Achilles, and Minerva, who preceding gave him victory, and encouraged him to slay the Legions and Trojans with his brazen spear. Wherefore it is not possible that a man should fight against Achilles, because one of the gods is ever beside him, who averts destruction. Besides also his weapon flies direct, nor stops before it has pierced through human flesh. though if the deity would extend an equal scale of victory, not very easily would he conquer me, although he boasts himself to be all brazen." But him again King Apollo, the son of Jove, addressed: "But do thou also pray, O hero, to the immortal gods, for they say that thou too art sprung from Venus, the daughter of Jove, but he from an inferior goddess. For the one is from Jove, and the other from the aged sea god. But direct thy invincible brass right against him, nor let him at all avert thee by haughty words and threats." Thus saying, he breathed great courage into the shepherd of the people, and he advanced through the front ranks, accoutred in shining brass. Nor did the son of Anchises escape the notice of white-armed Juno, going against the son of Peleus through the ranks of men. But calling the gods together, she addressed them: "Consider now, both Neptune and Minerva, in your minds, how these things shall be. This Æneas, accoutred in shining brass, has advanced against the son of Peleus, and Phoebus Apollo has urged him on. But come, let us, however, turn him back again, or let some one of us stand by Achilles and give him great strength, nor let him at all be wanting in courage, that he may know that the mightiest of the immortals love him, and that those, on the contrary, are vain, who hitherto avert war and slaughter from the Trojans. But we have all come down from Olympus, about to participate in this battle, lest he should suffer anything among the Trojans today. But hereafter he shall suffer those things, as many as fate at his birth wove in his thread of destiny, to him what time his mother brought him forth. But if Achilles shall not learn these things from the voice of a god, he will afterwards be afraid when any god comes against him in battle, for the gods, when made manifest, are terrible to be seen manifestly." But her then earth-shaking Neptune answered: "Juno, be not beyond reason enraged, nor is it at all necessary. I indeed would not desire that we should engage the other gods in a battle, since we are much more powerful. Rather let us, going out of the way, sit down upon a place of observation. But the war shall be a care to mortals. But if Mars shall begin the combat, or Apollo, or shall restrain Achilles, and not suffer him to fight, then immediately shall the strife of contention there arise to us. And I think that they, having very speedily decided it, will return to Olympus, and mix with the assembly of other gods, violently subdued by necessity under our hands." Thus then, having spoken, the azure-haired god led the way to the lofty mound-raised wall of divine Hercules, which the Trojans and Pallas Minerva had made, that flying he might escape from the sea-monster when pursued from the shore to the plain. There then Neptune sat down, and the other gods, and drew an indissoluble cloud round their shoulders, whilst on the other side they sat upon the tops of Callicolone, around thee, O archer Apollo, and Mars, the sacker of cities. Thus they sat on both sides, planning designs, yet both were unwilling to commence grievous war. But Jove, sitting aloft, cheered them on. All the plain, however, was filled with them, and glittered with the brass of men and horses, and the earth echoed under the feet of them rushing together. But two heroes, by far the most valiant, advanced towards each other, into the midst of both armies, eager to fight: Æneas, son of Anchises, and noble Achilles. And first Æneas, threatening, advanced, nodding with his strong casque, and before his breast he held his impetuous shield, and shook his brazen spear. But on the other side Pelides rushed against him like a destructive lion, which men assembled together, a whole village, are anxious to kill. He, however, at first despising them proceeds, but when some one of vigorous youths has wounded him with a dart, yawning he collects himself for a spring, and the foam arises round his teeth, and his valiant soul groans within his breast, and he lashes his sides and thighs on both sides with his tail, and rouses himself to battle. Then grimly glaring, he is borne straight on by his strength, if he can kill some of the men, or is himself destroyed in the first crowd. Thus did his might and noble soul urge Achilles to go against the magnanimous Æneas. But when now advancing they approached each other, swift-footed noble Achilles first addressed the other: "Why, O Æneas, coming through so great a length of crowd, dost thou stand against me? Does then thy soul urge thee to fight with me, hoping that thou wilt govern the horse-breaking Trojans in the place of Priam? Yet even if thou shalt slay me, not thus will Priam place this reward in thy hand, for he has sons, and he is himself steady, nor inconstant. Or if thou slayest me, have the Trojans cut off for thee an enclosure of soil surpassing others, suited to vines and the plough, that thou mayest cultivate it? Still I hope thou wilt effect it with difficulty, for I think I have at some other time put thee to flight with my spear. Dost thou not remember when I impetuously drove thee, when alone, from the oxen with rapid feet, down the Idaean mountains? Then indeed thou didst never turn round while flying, but didst escape thence into Lyrnessus. But I wasted it, having attacked it with the aid of Minerva and Father Jove. The women also I led away captives, having taken away their day of freedom, but Jove and the other gods preserved thee. However, I do not think they will protect thee now, as thou castest in thy mind. But I exhort thee, retiring, to go into the crowd, nor stand against me, before thou suffer some evil. But it is a fool who knows a thing only when it is done. But him Aeneas answered in turn, and said, Do not think, O son of Peleus, to affright me, like an infant boy, with words, since I also well know how to utter both threats and reproaches. But we know each other's race, and we know our parents, hearing the words of mortal men long since uttered, although by sight indeed neither dost thou know mine, nor I thine. They say indeed that thou art the offspring of renowned Peleus, and of thy mother Thetis, the fair-haired sea-nymph, whereas I boast myself to be sprung from magnanimous Anchises, and Venus is my mother. Of these the one or the other shall this day lament their beloved son, for I think we shall not return from the battle thus separated by childish words. But if thou desirest to be taught these matters, that thou mayest well know our race, for many men know it, proud compelling Jove indeed first begat Dardanus, and he built Dardania, for sacred Ilium, the city of articulate-speaking men, was not as yet built in the plain, and they still dwelt at the foot of many-rilled Ida. Dardanus again begat a son, King Erectonius, who was then the richest of mortal men, whose 3,000 mares pastured through the marsh, rejoicing in their tender foals. Boreas, however, was enamoured of some of these when pasturing, and having likened himself to an azure-maned steed, covered them, and they, becoming pregnant, brought forth 12 female foals, which when they bounded upon the fruitful earth, ran over the highest fruit of the stalks of corn, nor did they break them, but when they sported over the broad back of the ocean, they ran along the surface of the ridge of the hoary sea. But Erectonius begat Tros, king of the Trojans. From Tros again were descended 3 illustrious sons, Ilus, Assaracus, and godlike Ganymede, who indeed was the handsomest of mortal men, and whom the gods caught up into heaven, to pour out wine for Jove, that on account of his beauty he might be with the immortals. Ilus again begat his renowned son Laomedon, but Laomedon begat Tithonus and Priam, Lampus, Clytius, and Hyceteon, a branch of Mars, and Assaracus Capus, who also begat his son Anchises. But Anchises begat me, and Priam noble Hector. Of this race and blood do I boast myself to be. But Jove increases and diminishes valour to men as he pleases, for he is the most powerful of all. But come, let us no longer talk of these things like little boys, standing in the middle combat of the strife, for it is possible for both to utter very many reproaches, so that 100-oared galley would not contain the burthen. For the language of mortals is voluble, and the discourses in it numerous and varied, and vast is the distribution of words here and there. Whatsoever word thou mayest speak, such also wilt thou hear. But what need is there to us of disputes and railing, that we should quarrel with each other like women, who being angry with a soul-destroying strife, proceeding into the middle of the way, chide each other with many things true and not true? For rage also suggests those things. With words, however, thou shalt not turn me courageous from my valour, before thou lightest against me with thy brass. But come quickly, let us make trial of each other with brazen spears. He spoke, and hurled his brazen spear against the dreadful shield, terrible to be seen, and the huge buckler resounded with the stroke of the javelin. But the son of Peleus, alarmed, held the shield from him with his strong hand, for he supposed that the long spear of great-hearted Aeneas would easily penetrate. Foolish! Nor did he reflect in his mind and soul that the glorious gifts of the gods are not easy to be subdued by mortal men, nor to yield. Nor then did the heavy spear of warlike Aeneas penetrate the shield, but the gold stopped it, the gift of the god. It penetrated, however, through 2 folds, but there were still 3, since Vulcan had drawn 5 folds over it, 2 brazen, 3 inside of tin, and 1 golden, in which the brazen spear was stopped. But Achilles next sent forth his long-shadowed spear, and struck against the shield of Aeneas, equal on all sides, at the outside edge, where the thinnest brass ran round it, and the ox-hide was thinnest upon it. But the Pelian ash broke through, and the shield was crushed by it. But Aeneas crouched, and being terrified, held the shield from him, whilst the spear, passing over his back, stuck in the earth, eager to go on, for it had burst through both orbs of the mighty shield. But he, having escaped the long spear, stood still, but immoderate sadness was poured over his eyes, terrified because the weapon had stuck so near him. But Achilles eagerly sprang upon him, drawing his sharp sword, and shouting dreadfully. Then Aeneas seized in his hand a stone, a great weight, which not 2 men could bear, such as men now are, but he, though alone, easily wielded it. Then indeed had Aeneas smitten him, rushing on with the stone, either upon the helmet or the shield, which kept off grievous destruction from him. And Pelides in close fight had taken away his life with the sword, had not earth-shaking Neptune quickly perceived it, and immediately addressed this speech to the immortal gods. Ye gods, certainly there is now grief to me on account of magnanimous Aeneas, who will quickly descend to Hades, subdued by the son of Peleus, foolish, being persuaded by the words of far-darting Apollo, nor can he by any means avert sad destruction from him. But why now should this guiltless man suffer evils gratuitously on account of sorrows due to others? For he always presents gifts agreeable to the gods who inhabit the wide heaven. But come, let us withdraw from him death, lest even the son of Saturn be angry, if indeed Achilles slay this man. Moreover, it is fated that he should escape, that the race of Dardanus, whom Jove loved above all the children that were descended from him and mortal women, may not perish without offspring, and become extinct. For already hath the son of Saturn hated the race of Priam, and the might of Aeneas shall now rule over the Trojans, and the sons of his sons, who may be born in after times. But him, large-eyed venerable Juno then answered, O Earth-shaker, do thou thyself reflect within thy mind, with respect to Aeneas, whether thou wilt withdraw him, or suffer him, being brave, to be subdued by Achilles, the son of Peleus. For already we two, I and Pallas Minerva, have sworn many oaths amongst all the immortals, that we will never help to avert the evil day from the Trojans, not even when all Troy, fired, shall burn with consuming flame, and the warlike sons of the Greeks fire it. But when the earth-shaking Neptune heard this, he hastened to go through the battle and the clash of spears, and came where were Aeneas and renowned Achilles. And immediately he shed a darkness upon the eyes of Achilles, son of Peleus, and he drew out the ashen spear, well guarded with brass, from the shield of magnanimous Aeneas, and laid it before the feet of Achilles, and pushed on Aeneas, lifting him high up from the ground. But Aeneas leaped over many ranks of men and many of horses, impelled by the hand of the god, and came to the rear of the troubled fight, where the Caucones were arrayed for war. But very near him came earth-shaking Neptune, and addressing him spoke winged words. O Aeneas, which of the gods commanded thee thus mad to combat against Achilles, who was at once more valiant than thou, and more dear to the immortals? But retire whenever thou shalt be opposed to him, lest even contrary to fate thou arrive at the habitation of Pluto. But when Achilles shall have attained his death and destiny, then again being confident, fight among the front ranks, because no other of the Greeks shall slay thee. So saying, he left him there, when he had told him all, and immediately afterwards dissipated the thick darkness from the eyes of Achilles, and he then saw very clearly with his eyes, whereupon groaning he addressed his magnanimous soul. Ye gods, certainly I behold this, a great marvel with mine eyes. The spear indeed lies upon the ground, nor do I at all perceive the man at whom I hurled it, desiring to kill him. Undoubtedly Aeneas too was dear to the immortal gods, although I suppose that he boasted thus idly. Let him go. There will be no spirit in him hereafter to make trial of me, who even now rejoicing has escaped from death. But come, having encouraged the warlike Greeks, I will make trial of the other Trojans going against them. He spoke, and sprang into the ranks, and cheered on every man. No longer now stand off from the Trojans, O noble Greeks, but on! Let man advance against man, and let him be eager to engage. Difficult is it for me, although being valiant, to attack so many warriors, and to fight with them all. Not even Mars, who is an immortal god, nor yet Minerva could charge and toil against the force of such a conflict. Yet whatever I can do with hands, with feet, and with strength, I declare that I will no longer be remiss, not ever so little, but I will go right through their line, nor do I think that any Trojan will rejoice whoever may come near my javelin. Thus he spoke, encouraging them. But illustrious Hector, upbraiding, animated the Trojans, and said that he would go against Achilles. Ye magnanimous Trojans, fear not the son of Peleus. I too could fight with words, even with the immortals, but with the spear it is difficult, for they are far more powerful. Nor shall Achilles give effect to all his words, but one part he shall fulfill, and the other leave half imperfect. Against him will I go, even though he were like to fire as to his hands, and to shining iron as to his might. Thus he spoke, inciting them, but the Trojans opposite quickly raised their spears. Their strength was mingled together, and a shout arose. Then also Phoebus Apollo, standing near, addressed Hector. Hector, do not at all fight in the van with Achilles, but receive him in the crowd, and from the tumult, lest by any chance he hit thee, or strike thee with the sword in close combat." Thus he spoke, and Hector sunk back again into the thick body of men, dismayed when he heard the voice of the god speaking. But Achilles leaped among the Trojans, clad with courage as to his soul, shouting dreadfully, and first slew gallant Iphition, son of Otrynteus, the leader of many people, whom the nymph Naias, born to Otrynteus, the sacker of cities, under snowy Tmolus, in the rich district of Hyda. Him, eagerly rushing straight forward, noble Achilles struck with his javelin in the middle of the head, and it was entirely split in two. He gave a crash as he fell, and noble Achilles boasted over him, "O son of Otrynteus, most terrible of all men, thou liest. Death is here upon thee. Thy birth, however, is at the Gygaean lake, where is thy paternal land, beside fishy Hyllus and eddying Hermus." Thus he spoke boasting, but darkness covered Iphithion's eyes. But the horses of the Greeks tore him with the tires of the wheels in the front ranks. After him Achilles smote Demoleon, son of Antenor, a brave repeller of the fight, in the temples through his brazen-cheeked helmet. Nor indeed did the brazen casque resist it, but through it the eager javelin broke the bone, and the whole brain within it was defiled, and he subdued him ardent. Next he wounded with his spear in the back Hippodamus as he was leaping down from his chariot, while flying before him. But he breathed out his soul and groaned, like as when a bull, dragged round the Heliconian king, bellows, as the youths drag him, and the earth-shaker is delighted with them. So as he moaned, his fierce soul left his bones. But he went with his spear against godlike Polydorus, the son of Priam. But him his father did not permit to fight, because he was the youngest among all, and dearest to him, and surpassed all in speed. Then indeed, through youthful folly, exhibiting the excellence of his speed, he ran among the front ranks till he lost his life. Him noble swift-footed Achilles smote rushing by, in the middle of the back, where the golden rings of his belt clasped together, and the double corslet met. Right through at the navel pierced the point of the spear, and uttering a groan, he fell upon his knees. A black cloud enveloped him, and stooping down, he gathered his intestines in his hands. But when Hector perceived his brother Polydorus holding his intestines in his hands, and rolled on the earth, a darkness was immediately poured over his eyes, nor could he any longer be employed afar off, but advanced towards Achilles, like unto a flame, brandishing his sharp spear. On the other hand, Achilles, as soon as he saw him, leaped up, and boasting spoke, "Near is the man who has most stung my soul, who has slain my cherished companion. No longer indeed let us dread each other through the bridges of war." He spoke, and sternly regarding him addressed noble Hector, "Come nearer, that thou mayest the sooner reach the end of death." But him, not daunted, crest-tossing Hector addressed, "O son of Peleus, do not expect to terrify me now like a little boy, at least with words, since I myself also well know how to speak both revilings and reproaches. I know that thou indeed art brave, and that I am inferior to thee. But these things indeed are placed at the knees of the gods, whether although being inferior, I shall take away thy life, striking thee with my spear, since my weapon also is sharp at the point." He spoke, and brandishing sent forth his spear, and Minerva with a breath turned it back from glorious Achilles, having breathed very gently. But it came back to noble Hector and lay before his feet. But Achilles, eager to slay him, rushed furiously on, shouting dreadfully. But Apollo, as a god, very easily snatched him away, and covered him with abundant haze. Thrice indeed swift-footed noble Achilles rushed on with his brazen spear, and thrice he smote the deep haze. But when he rushed on the fourth time, like unto a god, he, dreadfully chiding, addressed to him winged words, "Dog, now again hast thou escaped death. Assuredly evil came very near thee, but Phoebus Apollo has now again preserved thee, to whom thou art wont to pray, when going into the clang of spears. Yet will I certainly finish thee, meeting thee hereafter, if indeed any of the gods be an ally to me also. At present, however, I will go after others of the Trojans, whomsoever I can." So saying, he struck Dryops with his spear in the middle of the neck, and he fell before his feet. Him then he left, and then detained Demuchus, son of Philotor, brave and great, wounding him in the knee with his spear, whom then striking with his great sword he deprived of life. But attacking both, he pushed Laogonus and Dardanus, the sons of Bias, from their chariot to the ground, wounding one with his spear, and striking the other in close combat with his sword. Also Tros, the son of Alastor, who came towards him, taking him by the knees, if on any terms he would spare him, and dismiss him alive, nor slay him, taking pity on their equal age. Fool, who knew not that he would not be persuaded, for he was by no means a tender-minded nor gentle man, but very ferocious. Tros indeed clasped his knees with his hands, desiring to supplicate him, but Achilles wounded him in the liver with his sword, and his liver fell out, and the black blood from it filled his bosom, and darkness veiled his eyes, wanting life. But standing near Mulius, he smote him with his javelin on the ear, and immediately the brazen blade went through the other ear. Then with his large hilted sword he smote Echeclus, son of Antenor, in the centre of the head, and the whole sword became tepid with blood. But purple death and violent fate seized his eyes. Then Deucalion, where the tendons of the elbow unite, there he pierced him through his hand with his brazen spear. But he, weighed down as to his hand, awaited him, perceiving death before him. But Achilles, smiting his neck with his sword, knocked the head off afar with its helmet, and the marrow sprang forth from the spine, and Deucalion lay extended on the ground. Then he hastened to go towards Rigmus, the renowned son of Piraeus, who had come from fertile Thrace, whom he smote in the middle with his javelin, and the brass was fixed in his stomach. And he fell from his chariot, and Achilles wounded in the back with his sharp javelin Areithus, the attendant, while turning back the steeds, and threw him from the chariot, and the horses were thrown into confusion. And as the blazing fire burns through the deep dells of a dry mountain, and the dense forest is consumed, and the wind agitating turns round the flame on all sides, thus he raged in every direction with his spear, like unto a deity, following those that were to be slain, and the black earth flowed with blood, as when anyone yokes broad, four-headed bulls to trample out white barley on the well-levelled floor, and it easily becomes small beneath the feet of the bellowing oxen. So the solid-hoofed horses, driven by magnanimous Achilles, trod down together both horses and shields, and the whole axle tree beneath was polluted with gore, and the rings which were round the chariot seat, which the drops from the horses' hooves spattered, as well as from the felloes. But the son of Peleus was eager to bear away glory, and was polluted with gore as to his invincible hands.